Okay, here's the next part. I apologize to my Scott High School students. The battery in my camera died abruptly. I think where I was at, we'll kind of pick up. I was talking about, we'll just kind of go back to this point. Sociology is a social science, and your book talks about this as well. So that's where sociology fits. I kind of gave you this image right here of the puzzle. Sociology fits in the world of social science. And this is kind of where we're at. Some examples of social science include history. You'll want to jot these down. And we're thinking we're talking about this when my camera died. So why study the history of anything? Whether it's sociology, psychology, or just the history of the world, of the United States, whatever. Well, 4 reasons. You won't find these in your book, so you want to jot these down. First of all, to learn what others have done. Sometimes it's productive. It's a productive endeavor just to learn what other people have done. To learn from the mistakes of history. We've made plenty of mistakes in our country. I'm sure you guys have made mistakes as individuals. So what kind of mistakes have we made in this country that we can learn from in terms of economics, political philosophies, warfare? We could go on and on and on. History is not always static. It can change. If something is static, that means it remains the same. I talked in the last video about geo versus heliocentrism. Everything we understood to be true about the universe hinged upon the understanding that the Earth was at the center of the universe for a long time. Some people came along and changed that. Newton is given credit largely for setting forth and proving the idea of heliocentrism, the sun being at the center. So now we have to change our scientific understanding and our knowledge of history, even based on this new discovery or new understanding. History helps us understand the present as well as the future. If you understand where you've been, that helps you get an idea of where you're at now, and then also helps you predict where you might be going in the future. Political science is another social science, and sociology also shares some things in common with political science. We're talking about the scientific study of politics and government, how governments are formed, how they operate, and how they relate to other institutions, how government impacts the economy, how it impacts education, how it impacts religion, etc. Political scientists are especially interested in how people attain ruling positions. How is it that some people become principals or CEOs or vice presidents or the president of the United States or the coach of a National Football League team or a baseball team? How do we maintain, or how do these people maintain their ruling positions? How do they keep them over time? Etc. Economics, the scientific study of the production and distribution of the material goods and services of society. Another example of a social science. And sociology has some things in common with economics as well. Economists want to know what goods are being produced, what they cost, and how they're produced. We value goods and services in our country because they ensure survival, they make life easier, and they make life more interesting. And sociology shares these things in common with economics, and we're also interested as sociologists in these economic components. Anthropology, another social science that sociology has things in common with, or incorporates into its spectrum, if you will, of study. Anthropology is a scientific study of culture and the understanding of culture. The chief job of an anthropologist includes understanding artifacts, structure, ideas and values, and forms of communication. And these are all areas that we'll talk about and touch upon as we move through the course. So what is culture? We could almost teach an entire course just on culture. I've taught anthropology courses as well. And culture is a big part of sociology, understanding a complete and total way of life for a group of people. In Chapter 2, we'll talk about culture specifically, and we'll go more in depth. And you don't have to know definitions for these terms here that are bulleted. Just trying to give you an idea right now of what we talk about. In culture, it incorporates language, beliefs, values, norms, behaviors, the material objects or things of a society that are culturally transmitted from one generation to the next. And we'll spend some more time talking about that shortly. Psychology, yet another social science that sociology borrows from and incorporates. The scientific study of thoughts, behaviors, and feelings of individuals. I'm a psychologist, sort of like my day job. I'm a prison psychologist. I work for a company called SciMed, and my job as a psychologist is to investigate these things that happen within the skin-bound organism, if you will. So psychology's focus is more narrow. It's on the person or the individual. And sociology at times will focus on the individual. How do groups or cultures impact us as individuals from a mental health standpoint? And we'll talk about that too. Psychology investigates personality, mental illness, intelligence, gender, motivation, emotion, sensation, perception, learning, memory, etc., etc. Now, there's a great debate in the social sciences. Two German sociologists, Habermas and Gadamer, the question is asked, and I'll ask you guys this question. Do you think you can completely step out of your own culture, your upbringing, okay, and objectively examine a different culture? Is it possible to suspend all of your biases and all of your cultural trappings and objectively, fairly evaluate a culture that is completely different from yours? Or do you carry some of your culture with you when you're evaluating a different culture? One said that you could, and one said that you really can't do that. Now, American sociologist Peter Berger synthesizes this debate, and this is discussed partly in one of your readings. He says that we cannot completely step out of our American culture when we try to analyze a different culture, but we can get pretty darn close if we learn to, A, become aware of our biases, and we all have them. I don't care who you are or how intellectually enlightened you think you are or I am, we all have our biases. But you have to be willing to become aware of them, identify them, and suspend them, put them on hold, because if you bring your American bias into the picture when you're trying to evaluate a different culture, you're not going to be able to objectively examine a different culture. And those three steps are pretty important. So we have to suspend our biases according to Berger. What is bias? Well, I can give you a Webster definition. It's an intentional or unintentional, so it can be on purpose or not on purpose. Inclination that works either against or for someone or something. So bias isn't always negative. Sometimes you're positively biased. Sometimes you give someone the benefit of the doubt when you shouldn't, for whatever reason. So again, sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes it's not on purpose. Sometimes you're biased and you don't even realize it. Two types of bias we'll talk about in this class: the halo effect and the horns effect. I did not make up those terms. Those are social scientific terms, and I love them because they pretty much define themselves. If you think of a halo, you think of an angel, someone who is perfect, someone who is wonderful. And I'm gonna suggest to you that probably you've met someone in your life or a group of people, and they've made a really good first impression on you. Think about maybe someone you've dated or that you are currently dating, or someone, maybe an ex would be a better example, an ex. There was something about that person that was attractive to you. They made a good first impression on you. Maybe it was their looks. Maybe they were physically attractive. Maybe they were nice. Whatever. That's the halo effect. If I come into class, if I was actually in a classroom with you guys, and I came in the first day and said, okay, we're going to meet once a week instead of 3 days a week, and everybody gets an A, and I'm bringing pizza and soda for free every day, that might create a good first impression with you guys. I could come in the second day and be a jerk. I could curse. I could slam the door. I could just be a total jerk for a week, 2 weeks. And you still may give me the benefit of the doubt. Well, he was a nice guy. That first day was awesome. He brought in soda and pizza, and he's giving us A's. So that halo effect will carry a lot of weight. The horns effect is the opposite. Someone who is really wonderful can make a horrible first impression. But that first impression will be weighed more heavily. I had a history professor back many years ago. First day of class, she locked the door, walked around the room, knocked all the hats off the guys who were wearing hats in her classroom. No hats in my class. Threatened to lock the door if you were a second late. Cut your grade a letter if you missed one class. And it was just a really bad first impression. A class of 40 went to a class of 13 from day 1 to 2. Second day of class, she was the nicest, sweetest woman you would ever meet. So at the end of the semester, we got the nerve to ask her, what's up with that first day of class? And even to this day, 20-some years later, all that people remember is that first impression, that first day of class, how awful she was. So sometimes, a negative first impression can bias you, even if the person is really a good person. If there's a negative first impression, it carries more weight. So we have to be able to realize this stuff and suspend these biases and kind of put them on hold. Now, go ahead and call this the end of this part of Part B for the PowerPoint Introduction to Sociology. Thank you.